And so we're joined in studio now by Jim Corr of the Corrs, of course, but who also, of course, came to some prominence last year when he gave us an interview prior to the first Lisbon Treaty referendum, and he's back again with us today. Hello to you, Jim.
How are you, Matt? Thanks for having me on again.
No problem at all. Tell us about the airplane you've got flying around Dublin today, please.
Oh, well, I've decided to launch my own mini campaign, my own no-vote campaign today. There was a friend of mine up there. He normally flies 747s, but I think he was doing something more worthwhile today.
So what did he fly around? He brought one of those banners behind, is it?
It was a banner, yeah. It took off from Weston Airport, and he just flew around for 2 hours, and thanks be to God, it was an absolutely beautiful day, so there's lots of people outside and saw it.
Indeed, we got a few emails into the office about it. What does it say on the banner?
JimCorr.com, vote no.
So if people go to JimCorr.com, what are they going to find?
They're going to find a short 8-minute video piece of me speaking about the Lisbon Treaty.
Okay. Before we get to what's in that today, what do you make of the news that Declan Ganley has re-entered the fray?
Absolutely fantastic news. I'm delighted, and I didn't expect this to happen at all. It's just great news.
Why is this so good?
Well, because obviously I'm very much a no voter, and I mean it's the same treaty that has been brought to us yet again. These protocol promises basically are not worth the paper that they're written on. So it's actually exactly the same treaty as the original one that was rejected by the Dutch and the French. But I'm going to bring up some points that I might have touched on the last time, but they're very, very relevant today because it's the same treaty. Now, I liken the quote that Valéry Giscard d'Estaing said to Le Monde newspaper as I liken it to, say you were going to buy a used car, right, and you happen to overhear the used car salesman telling a friend of his about the defects in the car that he was trying to sell you. Would you buy that car? Of course you wouldn't, right? And now listen to this quote. Public opinion would be led to adopt, without knowing it, the proposals we dare not present to them publicly. All the earlier proposals will be in the new text, but will be hidden and disguised in some way. Would you sign on the dotted line to that treaty? Absolutely not.
But the treaty is in front of us. Now, if people want to go and read the treaty, it's a long treaty, it's a very detailed treaty, but everything is there in black and white, isn't it? I mean, what is hidden if it is actually there in the treaty?
Well, so I'll get to that in a second. I want to give you another quote, since it's one I didn't give the last time. The founding father of the EU, Jean Monnet, said, Europe's nations shall be guided towards a superstate without their people understanding what is happening. This can be accomplished by successive steps, each disguised as having an economic purpose, sounds familiar, but which will eventually and irreversibly lead to federation. Now again, would you sign on the dotted line to a treaty once you hear the founding father uttering those words? I don't think so.
Well, that's a quote. I mean, what context was that quote uttered, and how many years ago was it?
I'm not actually sure when it was uttered, but he certainly said that. I don't have the date here, but just in relation to the deception that is in the treaty, I took one of the articles for an example, and Article 2 of Protocol number 6. From the European Charter of Fundamental Rights, which becomes legally binding if we pass this Lisbon Treaty. It says, everybody has a right to life, nobody shall be condemned to death. And that sounds lovely, okay, but then there's
pretty straightforward as well, isn't it?
But there's a footnote which says, a state may make provisions in its law for the death penalty in times of war or imminent threat of war. So what they've done is they've created a little back door by which they can either dilute the original basis of the article or else negate it completely.
But how likely is that? This is the argument that Aaron Gabrock made on this programme the other night. They have the ad in a live newspaper, the Catholic Fundamentalist newspaper, which is delivered door to door, making exactly the same argument about that particular provision as you're making. In reality, how likely do you think is that to happen in Ireland, that people, because they're suffering from depression or mental illness or because they're in poverty, would have their children taken away from them, have their liberty taken away from them? I mean, who really thinks that is ever likely to happen?
Well, there's a massive transfer of power, an incremental transfer of power happening from the Irish government over to the unelected bureaucrats in Brussels. And another major worrying thing about this...
Jim, what's wrong with that? Haven't we made a complete hames of running the country here? Haven't all the best things that have happened in Ireland, in making Ireland modern over the last 30 and 40 years, have come from the various European laws that we've been forced to enact? Hasn't it made it a far better country, the fact to be a more liberal country, more socially democratically progressive country that we've had to take on various rules and laws from Europe that we probably wouldn't have otherwise?
Well, that's a question you should put to the farmers and fishermen, because our farmers and fishermen have been squeezed out of existence because of EU laws. Our farmers are being forced to sell milk for cheaper than cost. Our fishermen are being forced to dump fish at sea because they're going over their quotas. I mean, that's disastrous for our country.
Didn't they get massive checks for many years under the Common Agricultural Policy? Didn't the country get the money for all the roads that have been built all around the country? Haven't we had massive infusion of capital, companies coming to operate out of Ireland because then they could sell into the European Union? Haven't we had the benefit, as I put to Lucinda Creighton earlier? The European Central Bank has effectively been funding this country over the last year when our banks went bust. Haven't we been saved by our membership of Europe?
Well, granted, our farmers and fishermen have been given loads of money, basically, not to fish and to leave fields empty. And, you know, it's supposed to be a food crisis on the planet, and they're being asked to do that. I mean, that surely is short-term gain for long-term pain. Our farmers and fishermen are the lifeblood of this country, and we really, really need to support them in every way, and the EU is not supporting them.
But will we not end up, if we start to follow that argument, going back to being all farmers and fishermen and not having all the modern industries and services that membership of the European Union has provided to us?
Well, I just, you know, in terms of basic foodstuffs, it's very important that we look after them. I think, you know, food is already generally suffering. I think that nutritional levels are probably down by about 40% because food is travelling into this country when it should be grown here. We should be eating our own produce.
But if you take that argument, then we wouldn't export any food. Our farmers wouldn't make any money by selling food abroad if nobody else was to be buying food out of other countries.
That's why I had no problem with the original treaty, where it was an economic agreement and free trade. You know, absolutely no problem. But you have a situation now where it's gone from economic integration into political integration, and that's a completely different ballgame.